I believe we have Father Gahl on the phone now. Father, are you there?
Yes, this is Father Bob Gahl, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. I know I spoke with you back when Pope Francis was elected. Yesterday, you said, I predict about 4 or 5 ballots. What made you say that, and what does that speak to in terms of the new Pope?
Right, I think there's two groups among the cardinals, and you could consider them factions, and those who see Francis as really establishing a new magisterium that's a break with the tradition. And on the other hand, those who see Francis as a continuation of John Paul II and Benedict. And therefore, they each had their own leaders who were in the very first ballots or scrutinies. But now this is apparently after 4 or perhaps 5 scrutinies. I think it's probably after 5 scrutinies that it took some time to shake out, in a sense, and to find those candidates that had support across those different groups or those different factions in such a way that, let's say, the progressives and the more conservative cardinals in the conclave would support the candidate that shook out from among the original ones. That's why I expected that it wouldn't be on the first ballot, but would take several. And here we're on, I think, the 5th ballot.
Let me ask this. How does it work in the conclave? Are you allowed to promote yourself, or do you need your team to do the lobbying for you?
Well, self-promotion would be, first of all, insane for someone to desire to become the Pope. And then secondly, it would be counterproductive. They're really looking for someone who doesn't desire the position, because the position of great sacrifice. But there are cardinals who are definitely promoting other cardinals. And therefore they talk about king makers or great electors, who are those cardinals that are real leaders among the other cardinals. And this was going on from before the conclave, during the general congregation just a few days ago, that these kingmakers were looking for their favorite candidate, and they were pushing them, promoting them among the others. There were also, I'm sure, cardinals that were acting in order to block out certain candidates. And those, I think, were those who were often cited in the media as being the front runners, but we'll find out very soon.
Being a front runner doesn't help you when you're in the conclave, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying in this conclave, given the polarization that we find in the world, but also in the church, some of the things that Pope Francis did were very controversial. And they're controversial with respect to those who are, let's say, ensconced in the offices in the Vatican, and controversial towards those who are out in the peripheries. And I'm thinking especially his document on blessing irregular unions and same-sex unions that came out in December of 2023 in the context of Synod on Synodality. That created some unrest and some disappointment among, for instance, the bishops in Africa. And I would sense that they would have been gathering together to make sure that that sort of thing wouldn't happen again, but that this Pope, who was just elected, would be one who would act in communion with the bishops around the world, really seeking the unity of the church around the tradition that was taught by Jesus.
Would you suggest, because there were 2 factions that, let's just say in that first vote, you know, one side is voting for their person, the next is voting for theirs, and that neither of them but someone new would have emerged?
Exactly. That's what I meant by the shakeout, that according to my analysis, those leading candidates would have flamed out because they've been blocked by the other group. And then during that shakeout, candidate that has crossover appeal, that wouldn't be blocked by either side, would then rise among the voting. And given that it happened fairly quickly, but not immediately, that's what I suspect may have occurred. As I say, we'll find out very soon. These are tense moments and exciting ones, yes.
And isn't that the wisdom? Go in a pope, come out a cardinal.
Yes, yes. And there's also this phrase that the Romans like, which is after a fat pope comes a skinny pope, or after a skinny pope comes a fat pope. And that often, and they're not referring just to his corpulence, to his dimensions, but of course they're referring also to a kind of style. But I really sense that we're looking for a man who has, in some ways, continuity with Pope Francis, certainly with his reform of the Vatican, with his really radiant personality and telegenic, someone like that, but who would also unite all of the episcopacy around the world.
And when you talk about Pope Francis, while he spoke a lot about caring for people, and be they, homosexuals. He spoke a lot about wanting women to be part of the church. When it came to actually changing doctrine, that really did not happen.
Right, that's a great point, Dina. That in fact, Pope Francis, with the appreciation for the solemnity of his office, really maintained the teaching of the church and didn't alter anything of significance in terms of what the church teaches, which I don't think can ever be altered, but changed. But what he did do is he changed the kind of style, and I think that's permanent. That the style, in fact, it was begun under John Paul II and under Benedict to emphasize that Christianity isn't about prohibitions, but it's about love, it's about forgiveness, it's about accepting the whole person and bringing them towards salvation. And therefore, Christianity is about joy. And I hope that when we see the new Pope come out on the balcony, and he may have a transformation of his own personality, but that we'll see joy. And here we hear the crowds applauding and cheering that they are going to instill even new joy in this new Pope.
Professor, it's a parade of sorts right now with the Swiss Guards and a band marching up to the doors of St. Peter's Basilica on the very place where the altar was. And just a few weeks ago, everyone said goodbye to Pope Francis. The altar stood there for the funeral mass.
Yes, indeed. So this part of this parade with the soldiers, they're both the gendarmes of the Vatican, who are the police force for the Vatican, and the Swiss Guard, the military force for the Vatican. This is also emblematic of the fact that the Pope is not only the head of the church from around the world, but he's also a head of state. And this represents his authority over the state of the Vatican. Of course, the kind of military power that he is able to flex is much less than the moral authority that he has over the world.
I want to get back to that point you made just a moment ago about substantive change to church teachings versus stylistic change. For those people who are looking for substantive change, let's take allowing women to become deacons or something like that. Do you see a point where the church moves in that direction if for no other reason than to say, the times have changed?
So regarding that sort of a change, like with respect to the ordination of women, those who are following the tradition of Jesus really want to affirm that the priesthood is a vocation of sacrifice. And so I'm a Catholic priest, and I chose this as a sacrifice, and I chose it also as a way of really committing myself to the bride of Jesus, that is the Catholic Church. But some people see the ordination of women through the context of a power struggle, from a kind of feminist revolution. And that's really at odds with the entire sense of the church. In fact, the Pope himself understands himself for centuries to be the servant of the servants of God. On the other hand, Pope Francis did do some reform in the Vatican and entailed elevating women to very important positions of authority in the Vatican, including the governor of the Vatican city-state, which over the civil affairs of the Vatican is a great authority, is now a woman. Well, she was up until the passing of the Pope, and then all of these offices subside until the new Pope may reinstate her. But so given a change like that, I don't see the Church changing her sacramental life, where we understand that the priest represents Jesus, who died on the cross for his bride, the Church.
Yes, and you're right. I mean, we're not going to see women as priests, and Pope Francis was very strong on that, but he did not only appoint the first female governor of Vatican City, but also the first female prefect of a dicastery, and I think he was trying to reach that compromise. And talk about how difficult that is in a church that is entrenched in history.
Well, these are great points, because actually in the church life, like in parishes and dioceses, there's so many women who have tremendous roles of leadership. I'm running a program of church management at Catholic University, and one of our students is the COO of a diocese here in the United States, and she's a lay woman, she's a mom, and she's really talented in business operations. And this is going on across the world. That actually many church organizations are right now run by women, and their leadership is very much appreciated. And then regarding moral truths, the fact that marriage is between a man and a woman and it's for the sake of giving life, this is something embedded in nature, And it's just the way human sexuality is, that reproduction occurs between a man and a woman. And it's also part of the teaching of the church, because we understand that God created us to seek infinity, to seek Him, and that the love between a man and a woman is a manifestation of that love that God has for creation.
Well, we thank you for your time and being with us on this historic moment. I'm sure we'll reach out to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. As we look forward to the Pope coming out, I mean, he'll come out and just after his name is stated, and it's almost like a new birth for the church in which we receive a new father. So God bless you all.
Thank you, Father. We appreciate you.